You know what's strange about money? We feel every small charge immediately. An extra dollar on a coffee, a subscription that quietly went up, a fee that shows up clearly on a receipt. Those are the ones most people never feel at all. They don't hurt today. They don't send notifications. They don't ask for permission. And if you've ever felt like you're working hard, saving when you can, doing what you're supposed to do, yet somehow still feel behind, this video is about you. Because the problem usually isn't that you're bad with money. It's that your money is leaking in places you were never taught to look. Welcome to BitInvests. Before we go any further, if you care about feeling calmer around money instead of constantly guessing whether you're doing things right, subscribe. These videos are built to make money feel less intimidating and more human. Now let's slow down and talk about something most people misunderstand. Fees. When people hear the word fees, they imagine obvious charges. Bank fees, late fees, service fees, annoying but visible. The dangerous fees don't look like that. They don't feel like punishment. They feel like nothing. They hide inside systems you trust. They're deducted automatically. That's not an accident. That's how human psychology works. Think about how you experience money in daily life. You swipe a card. You see a number on a screen. If the number doesn't change much, your brain relaxes. You feel safe. Most people don't feel poor because their money is disappearing fast. They feel poor years later when they realize it never grew the way they expected. And that gap, that's where fees live. Let's make this personal for a moment. Imagine two versions of you. Same job, same effort, same discipline. One version feels calm about money in their later years. The other feels constant pressure. The difference usually isn't income. It isn't intelligence. It isn't luck. It's friction. Small, invisible friction applied every year for decades. Here's the part nobody tells you early on. Your brain is wired to focus on short-term pain, not long-term erosion. A sudden bill hurts. A slow leak doesn't. That's why people will argue over a small charge at a store, but never question what's happening quietly in the background of their finances. Your mind says, if nothing hurts right now, everything must be fine. But money doesn't work like pain signals. It works like gravity, always pulling, always there, whether you notice or not. This is where most people get stuck. They assume that as long as they're saving something, they're doing okay. They assume that as long as they're not making obvious mistakes, they're safe. But money doesn't punish obvious mistakes the most. It punishes passive ones, the kind where you do nothing and assume nothing is happening. Let's talk about why this happens. When you don't physically hand money over, your brain doesn't process it as a loss. If you pay cash, it hurts more. If money disappears digitally, it feels abstract. That's why subscriptions are so powerful. That's why automatic deductions go unnoticed. That's why long-term fees are so destructive. Your brain evolved to survive immediate threats, not slow, invisible drains over 20 or 30 years. Your mind shrugs. No alarm. No stress response. Just silence. And silence is expensive. Over time, those tiny losses stack. Not linearly, exponentially. This is where people usually tune out because they expect a lecture. So let me say this clearly. This is not about being perfect. It's not about optimizing every dollar. It's not about turning you into a finance robot. It's about awareness. And boring is good. Boring is calm. Boring is stable. Boring is what actually works, not emotionally. Over time. Imagine carrying a bucket of water across a long distance. If there's a small hole at the bottom, You don't notice at first. The bucket still feels heavy. You're still carrying something. But by the time you reach the end, you're confused about why there's so little left. That's how fees work. They don't empty your bucket. They thin it, year after year. Most people don't wake up one day broke. They wake up one day tired of worrying. And when they finally look back, they can't point to a single bad decision, just a lot of small ones they never questioned. That's what we're doing in this video. We're questioning the normal things, not to scare you, not to shame you, but to give you control back. In the next part, we're going to talk about the first type of fee that quietly drains people who believe they're doing everything right. It's the one that sounds harmless, the one people defend, the one that doesn't feel like a mistake until decades later. And once you see it, you'll never unsee it. If this already feels uncomfortably familiar, let me know in the comments. Not with numbers, just with a simple "I've felt this." And if you know someone who works hard but still feels stuck financially, share this with them, not as advice, just as awareness. This isn't about getting rich fast. It's about stopping the slow bleed. Let's talk about the first leak, the one almost everyone has, the one that feels reasonable, the one that sounds small enough to ignore. It usually hides inside something you trust, a retirement account, a long-term investment, a place where your money is supposed to grow quietly while you live your life. On paper, everything looks fine. You put money in, you don't touch it. You assume time will do the work, and technically it does, just not all for you. Here's the mental trick your brain plays. 1% feels tiny, 0.5% feels invisible. Even 2% doesn't sound like much. Your brain translates percentages into emotions, not math. 1% feels like spare change. It feels polite. It feels harmless. But here's what's actually happening beneath the surface. This fee isn't charged once. It's not a one-time mistake. It's not a small tax you move past. It's charged again, and again, and again, every single year. Not just on what you put in, but on everything your money becomes. So as your balance grows, the fee grows with it. It never stops. It never caps out. It never says, okay, you've paid enough. This is where most people misunderstand the damage. They think the fee only reduces returns a little bit. What it really does is steal time. Time is the most valuable part of money, because money doesn't grow from effort. It grows from patience. And when a fee takes a small bite every year, it doesn't just take money. It interrupts compounding. Think of compounding like a snowball rolling downhill. At first, it's slow. Then it gets heavier. Then suddenly, it's doing the work for you. A fee is like someone shaving a layer off that snowball every few feet. You're still rolling downhill, but you're never allowed to build full momentum. Now let's make this feel real without overwhelming you. Imagine two people. Both save consistently. Both start at the same age. Both leave their money alone. One pays very little friction along the way. The other pays just a bit more every year. No dramatic mistakes. No bad behavior. No reckless choices. Just slightly more drag. At first, their balances look similar, so nobody worries. 10 years in, one starts pulling ahead. 20 years in, the gap feels uncomfortable. 30 years in, it's life-changing. Not because one worked harder, because one kept more of what they earned. This is the part that messes with people emotionally. They don't feel like they're doing anything wrong. They followed the rules. They saved. They were responsible. And yet later, they feel punished. That feeling doesn't come from laziness or ignorance. It comes from not being shown where the friction lives. Here's why this fee is so effective at staying hidden. It's deducted before you ever see the money. Your account balance updates after the fee is taken, so your brain treats the remaining number as reality. You never mourn what's gone because you never saw it exist. Psychologically, this is powerful. Your mind anchors to visible numbers, not missing ones. That's why people will obsess over small expenses they can see. while ignoring massive costs they can't. It's not stupidity, it's wiring, and the system takes advantage of that wiring. Now here's the important shift. This isn't about villainizing systems, it's about understanding incentives. Any system that charges a percentage benefits when your money grows. That sounds aligned with you, until you realize something. They get paid whether or not your outcome improves meaningfully. They get paid for activity, for complexity, for involvement. You get paid for patience. Those are not the same goals. So when people say, it's only a small percentage, they're technically correct in the short term. But money doesn't live in the short term. It lives across decades. And decades magnify everything. A small drag becomes a heavy weight. Now let's pause and ground this emotionally. If you're feeling a little uncomfortable right now, that's normal. Most people never realize this until much later. And when they do, the regret isn't about money. It's about time. They think if I had known this earlier, I wouldn't have changed my life overnight, but I would have made one or two boring adjustments. That's it. Not drastic moves, not risky baits, just less friction. Here's the calm truth. You don't need perfect decisions to build stability. You need fewer silent losses. But don't panic. Awareness alone already puts you ahead. One that looks responsible. One that gives emotional comfort. And quietly drains buying power year after year while you feel protected. Before we go there, I want you to reflect on one thing. Have you ever assumed your long-term money was handled just because it was set up? If yes, you're not alone. That assumption is where friction hides best. Drop a comment if this made something click even slightly. And if this feels like something people around you never talk about, share it. Quiet awareness spreads faster than loud advice. There's another leak that doesn't feel like a mistake at all. In fact, it feels like the opposite. It feels responsible. It feels cautious. It feels like you're being an adult. It's cash sitting still. Money in a checking account. Money parked and waiting. Money you tell yourself you'll deal with later. And because the number doesn't go down, your brain relaxes. You look at the balance. It's the same as last month. Nothing bad happened. So you move on. This is one of the most common emotional traps in money. Your brain confuses stability with safety. If the number doesn't change, it feels like nothing is being lost. But something is. Just not in a way your nervous system knows how to detect. Think about a bar of soap left under running water. You don't hear it dissolving. You don't see dramatic change. But come back later and it's thinner. Cash works the same way. It doesn't scream when it's losing value. It just slowly buys less. And because this happens gradually, your brain adapts without alarm. You still feel okay. That's why this leak survives for decades in otherwise careful people. Let's talk about why holding cash feels so good emotionally. Cash represents control. You can access it instantly. You don't have to think. You don't have to worry about timing. There's comfort in knowing it's there, especially if you've ever experienced financial stress. Your brain says at least this part is safe. But safety and stillness are not the same thing. Cash that never moves is not neutral. It's slowly falling behind. Not because you did something wrong, but because time is moving forward whether your money does or not. This is where people get confused. They assume the risk is in action. Investing feels risky. Changing accounts feels risky. Doing something feels risky. Doing nothing feels safe. But doing nothing has a cost too. It's just delayed. And delayed costs are the hardest for humans to feel. Here's the emotional twist. People who keep too much cash often believe they're being conservative. In reality, they're choosing certainty today over capacity tomorrow. And that trade-off is invisible until years pass. Nobody regrets holding cash in the short term. They regret it when they look back and realize how much ground they lost. Not dramatically, quietly. I'll move it later. I want flexibility. I don't want to make the wrong choice. Those thoughts feel wise. But money doesn't reward hesitation. It rewards alignment, not constant movement, not constant decision-making, just alignment between time and purpose. Here's a simple way to think about it. Cash is great for short-term needs. It's terrible at long-term jobs. Wrong tool, right intention. And because no one teaches this clearly, people end up with money in the wrong places for years. They're not reckless. They're cautious in the wrong direction. Now let's connect this to psychology. Your brain loves certainty more than growth. Certainty feels like relief. Growth feels abstract. Your mind chooses stillness, especially if you've ever felt burned before. This isn't weakness, it's protection. But protection has a cost when overused. Imagine wearing a helmet everywhere. At first, it feels smart. Eventually, it limits how you move. Cash is financial armor, useful in the right moments, heavy if worn all the time. And here's the key insight most people miss. You don't need to eliminate cash. You need to right-size it. Enough to feel stable, not so much that it suffocates progress. Most people never revisit this balance. They set it once during a stressful time, and then leave it untouched for years. Because revisiting it feels uncomfortable. But comfort today can be expensive tomorrow. This is where we start to see a pattern. The most damaging money mistakes aren't emotional explosions. They're emotional freezes. Moments where nothing happens, and nothing keeps happening. And while we're frozen, time keeps charging rent. Now we're going to talk about the third leak. This one doesn't hide in systems. It hides inside you, not in a judgmental way, in a human way. It's the cost of reacting, the cost of fear, the cost of trying to feel in control during moments of uncertainty. This one doesn't show up on statements. It doesn't come with a percentage, but over a lifetime, it's often the most expensive of all. Before we move on, take a second. Ask yourself honestly, is there money in your life that hasn't moved in years? Not because it's working, but because deciding what to do with it feels heavy. If yes, that's not failure. That's normal. And awareness is the beginning of clarity. Leave a comment if this section hit closer than expected. And if you know someone who prides themselves on being safe with money but still feels stuck, share this with them. The last leak is the hardest one to talk about, not because it's complicated, but because it's personal. This one doesn't come from a bank. It doesn't come from an account. It doesn't come from a product. It comes from being human, from feelings, from fear, from the urge to do something when uncertainty shows up. This is the cost of reacting. Here's how it usually starts. Nothing dramatic happens at first. Just a bad headline, a scary conversation, a sudden drop on a screen. Your chest tightens a little. Your mind starts racing. What if this gets worse? What if I should move my money? What if I'm being irresponsible by not acting? This is not greed. This is protection. Your brain is trying to reduce discomfort. The problem is money doesn't reward comfort-seeking behavior. It rewards consistency, and consistency feels boring until it's tested. Most people think bad money decisions look reckless. In reality, they usually look responsible in the moment, selling to be safe, waiting for clarity, pausing until things feel stable. Those decisions feel calm, but over time, this is the behavioral leak. It's not about intelligence. It's not about knowledge. Some of the smartest people struggle the most here, because the smarter you are, the better you are at justifying emotional decisions with logic. You don't say, "I'm scared." You say, "I'm being cautious." You don't say, "I'm reacting." You say, "I'm waiting for the right moment." And your brain believes you. That's why this leak is so expensive. It feels like control, but control is not the same as progress. Here's what's happening under the surface. Your mind evolved to survive danger, not to grow wealth over decades. When something feels threatening, your instinct is to freeze or flee. That instinct kept humans alive. They work on patience. So when you react emotionally, you're using the wrong tool for the job. It's like slamming the brakes every time the road curves slightly. You feel safer. but you never get where you're going efficiently. This is why the most successful long-term investors often look boring. They don't react much. They don't change plans often. They don't check constantly. Not because they're fearless, but because they've removed decision-making from emotional moments. That's the real solution. Not discipline, not willpower. Removal. Removing yourself from the moment where feelings make decisions. This is where everything we've talked about comes together. The leaks don't exist because people are careless. They exist because systems and psychology work against slow awareness. So here's the turning point. Not a dramatic realization, not an overnight transformation, just a quiet shift in how you think about money. Money is not something you need to constantly manage. It's something you need to stop interfering with. The goal isn't to be clever. It's to be consistent. Here's a simple framework you can remember without stress. First, simplify where your money lives. Fewer places. Clear purpose for each. Some money for short-term stability. Some money for long-term growth. Not everything everywhere. Second, reduce friction. If something quietly takes a little bit from you forever, question it. Not aggressively, just honestly. Small drags matter over time. Third, automate the important decisions. Automation isn't laziness, it's protection. It protects you from fear, from overthinking, from reacting. When money moves automatically, emotions don't get a vote. Fourth, check less often. This sounds counterintuitive, but it works. The more you watch short-term movement, the more your brain wants to intervene. Distance creates calm. Calm protects progress. Now let's ground this with real people. Imagine someone with an average income. Nothing extreme, nothing flashy. They don't chase perfect timing. They don't constantly tweak. They just remove leaks. Over years, something interesting happens. They feel less anxious. They stop obsessing. They trust the process. Not because they're confident, but because the system doesn't require constant input. That emotional relief is part of the payoff. Money peace is not about luxury. It's about not carrying constant tension. Most people underestimate how valuable that is. Now let's gently clear up a few misconceptions. You don't need to act every time something feels urgent. Urgency is often emotional noise. You don't need perfect decisions to win. You need fewer bad ones. You don't need to understand everything. You just need a setup that doesn't punish you for being human. And you are human. You will feel fear sometimes. You will feel uncertainty. You will feel tempted to act. The goal isn't to eliminate those feelings. It's to design your money so those feelings don't control outcomes. Over time, the payoff compounds quietly, not just financially, emotionally. Less stress, less second guessing, more confidence without needing to feel brave. And that's the part people don't talk about. Stability feels boring from the outside. From the inside, it feels like relief. Let's bring this home. Fees don't destroy wealth in one big moment. They do it slowly, silently, while you're focused on everything else. The visible stuff distracts you. The invisible stuff decides your future. But once you see the leaks, you can't unsee them. And once you plug them, you don't need to constantly hustle or optimize. You just stop volunteering to lose. That's it. Not dramatic, not flashy, just quietly effective. If this video made you think differently about money, let me know in the comments. Even a short sentence helps this reach people who need it. And if you know someone who works hard but feels like money never quite works for them, share this. Not as advice, just as perspective. This is BitInvests. And remember, wealth isn't about how much you make. It's about how much friction you remove and how patiently you let time do its work.